Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Chamber's Spring Reporters Forum. There's a lot of information to be covered today. It's very timely time to have this with everything that's going on in the state between the gubernatorial election, the budget, and what's going to happen from Washington. So we'll be very interested to hear what our guest panelists will have to say today. I want to first of all thank our sponsors for today's event, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey and KPMG. Thank you very much for your ongoing support of the Chamber and our events. And today's event will be something that I think you'll be proud of. We have today four reporters who will be covering the topics that Michael presents to them. They are four people who are engaged every day in what's going on in New Jersey and have great insight into both business and politics in New Jersey, which kind of drives our state. And so Michael, Stacie, Matt, John, and Brent, thank you in advance for everything you're going to do today. I would also like to comment on the fact that this is the first reporters roundtable we've had since the untimely passing of Matt Arco, a trusted colleague of many of us, and someone who will be greatly missed by the state of New Jersey and the profession of journalism. Matt was very participatory in a lot of events we had at the chamber, and so I just want to mention that we're going to miss Matt, and I'm sure a lot of people here would agree with that. So let's get started with today's event. And I'd like to introduce our moderator, Michael Shapiro, who is the CEO and publisher of TapIntoNet.net, a network of more than 95 franchised local news sites across New Jersey. Michael brings deep experience in New Jersey journalism and local reporting, and we're thrilled to have him here to guide the panel. So, Michael, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Tom, and good morning, everybody. I think, given the countless mailers and commercials everybody has been seeing, all of us, everyone, are going to be very happy when the primary is over. But welcome today to our panel. We have a stellar panel here today, and I'd like to introduce them. We have Stacie Sherman, who's the senior editor for the America's News Desk at Bloomberg News. We have Matt Fazelpoor, who's the staff writer for Government and Economic Development at NJBIZ. We have Brent Johnson, politics reporter at NJ.com. And rounding out our panel, we have John Reitmeyer, budget and public finance writer for NJ Spotlight News. So let's get right to it. Let's start with the gubernatorial primary. And Brent, I guess this question will be for you. The polls are showing that former Assemblyman Jack Ciattarelli is leading the field. Are the polls accurate, you think? And where does the race stand on the Republican side?
Yeah, I think they're accurate. From everything I'm hearing on the ground is that the question now is not will Jack win, but how much will he win by? A big deal in this race was Donald Trump endorsed Ciattarelli. There was a months-long behind-the-scenes struggle between Ciattarelli and Bill Spadea to get Trump's endorsement. Trump had the endorsement swung his way, and in a primary where a lot of the voters are loyal to the president, that matters a lot. That's even though Ciattarelli criticized him in the past. Trump went with the person who's been leading in the polls. So that's on that side, that's the case, that he's the favorite.
Yeah, and following up on that, given that Ciattarelli was critical of Trump in the past, et cetera, where do you see Ciattarelli standing on the key issues facing New Jersey?
I mean, he went from being a Trump critic 10 years ago to then kind of walking a thin line on Trump in the last election, and now he's fully embraced him. He was on a phone call with the president last night, a telephone rally, and Trump gave his full-throated endorsement, and Ciattarelli said, "I'm grateful to have it, and we won't let you down," and that they're vowing to turn New Jersey blue to red. So, I mean, he hasn't said anything where he's been asked, will he buck the president on any policies? He hasn't said so yet. So the question is, in the general, is Trump going to be an albatross in what's still a blue state, even though it's getting a little bit more purple? And that's going to be the big question, is how much of an albatross is Trump in the general election to Ciattarelli?
Yeah, no, kind of following up on that, in terms of Senator John Bramnick and radio talk shows, former radio talk host Bill Spadia, where do you see them finishing in the race, and where do they stand versus Ciattarelli in terms of the key issues facing Republican voters?
Yes, everyone in the Republican side of the race says they want to cut taxes and slash government. They all say they want to revamp education. Spadia is probably the most conservative candidate of the big three, saying that he doesn't want schools to be woke, and he will, they all say that we'll get rid of pronouns, but Spadia said he wants to give parents more say in children's education. So they all lean relatively right, except for Bramnick. Bramnick is a noted centrist, and he's all about cutting government and taxes, but he doesn't go as far as the others on some of those topics. Spadia looks like he'll probably finish second. The question is by how much. Most expect a double-digit victory for Ciattarelli, and the question is Bramnick. There's starting to be chatter among insiders in the Republican Party. Does Bramnick have enough to leap over Spadia in the standings? But you also hear a lot of moderate Republicans in the state say they wish Bramnick would be the nominee because they think he would be the most likely to win in November.
John, for Ciattarelli, where does he stand in terms of business, and how would he impact business in New Jersey, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, he has a business background. We often hear him labeled as a former state lawmaker, which he is, but he also has a business background. So you would imagine that he has some personal experience and insight that would connect him to sort of issues that businesses care about. And then I just think more broadly, when you look at, it might be harder to find differences in the Democratic side of this with where the current administration is on key issues like school funding and affordable housing. But Ciattarelli definitely would take the state in a different direction on those topics. And so I think there's business interest sometimes in the big picture and the total spend and whether the budget's balanced versus even some of the micro issues. So no matter which Republican sort of comes out of this, and we all, I think, are pretty confident saying it'll be likely Ciattarelli, I think it'll be a departure headed into the general from what the candidates on the other side of the ticket are talking about.
Hypothetically, if Ciattarelli makes it through the primary, he's the general election candidate. Um, Stacie, what do you think is the impact of Trump's budget passing, his tax bill passing? What do you think the impact would be in terms of Ciattarelli and the campaign in New Jersey?
Well, I think the biggest issue in Trump's big beautiful bill is the SALT deduction and raising that cap, and that's the state and local income tax deduction that Trump put a cap on in his first term. And that's a big deal for us New Jerseyans because I think the average tax bill now has topped $10,000 a year. So that 10,000 cap right now, New Jersey and New York Congress members have really been lobbying to increase that. And I think last I looked, it was at like they're trying to raise it to 30,000 or 40,000. So I think that is a big deal. And if that passes, that could really help Ciattarelli or whoever the Republican candidate is.
On the subject of Trump, Brent, how do you see if Ciattarelli is the victor in the primary? How do you see Trump impacting the general election come November?
Yeah, it's a really good question because last year Trump he shrunk his margin in New Jersey. He performed a lot better, even though he didn't win. And you see Republican registration is outpacing Democratic registration. They're closing the gap a little. The question is how unpopular is Donald Trump with the electorate at large in New Jersey? Is he still kind of okay where he was last year, or have his policies shifted to the point where now people are not liking him again? And he's polling poorly because Democrats are going to tie Jack Ciattarelli directly to Trump. They've already started. There's now, unlike in the past where Ciattarelli kind of flirted with being a Trump supporter, there's now a picture of the two of them together. He's basically said he's grateful for the endorsement. So it's a different game this time. And you're definitely going to see them try and paint him as Jack Ciattarelli, the Trump candidate. And it's a question of how effective that's going to be, because historically, New Jersey goes back and forth between parties when it comes to the governorship. The last time one party won 3 governor races in a row was 1961, which for context is 3 years before the Beatles appeared on Ed Sullivan. So it's, the historical trends favor the Republicans here, but Trump is an X factor. We've never had a president like Trump before, so who really knows?
Yeah, and John, you wanted to weigh in?
I think that's somebody different than me, but I'm happy to
Oh,
jump
I'm
in
sorry. I saw somebody
this.
in chat. I apologize.
No,
But you weigh in anyway.
yeah, I would. I do have a thought on this because I think Brent brings up a really good point. Like we tend to think that it's a big problem for Chitterelli, but Chitterelli has this huge tailwind of coming off 8 years of single party rule in Trenton, and so it's sort of this advantage that whoever the Republican nominee, I should say, will be coming in with this conventional wisdom of Trenton swinging to the other party after a two-term governor. That all said, I think Governor Murphy tried to connect Chitterelli last time around to Trump. And it was a little different because Trump was out of office and seemingly had been made irrelevant. This time around, Trump is in office and is doing things that is opening the eyes of many New Jersey residents. So it creates a whole different dynamic. For us, it's like it'll be a good test case of the historical trends that Brent referred to.
Yeah, now on the subject of Trump, one of the things we've been seeing is, every other day there's another announcement about tariffs and things like that, and the economy is kind of, well, at least the stock market is kind of like on a bungee cord, like one day up 1,000 points and the next day down 1,000 points. I guess this question for Matt: how do you see that impacting the governor's race post primary in New Jersey, the economy and as well as the stock market and these tariff announcements?
Yeah, I think the tariff issue is looming over everything. Actually, Provident Bank's out with a new survey this morning saying that, their business owners are concerned about it, certainly. But I think getting over that initial hump, obviously the tariff rates have kind of varied based by different tweets, different timeframes, court orders and whatnot. So I think business owners are trying to get a gauge of what actually the state of play is and how to even adapt. But again, the numbers this morning from that poll I was referring to show that they're concerned but still confident about growth. So it's kind of these two things at play at once. As we kind of adjust to this kind of new normal and tariff world, and some of these trade wars. Also, one thing just on the race itself, Mike. We mentioned some of the the historical trends that Brent pointed to. It's just this interesting collision, right? Because you have the 8-year referendum on Phil Murphy, right, which a Democrat is going to have to contend with, but also New Jersey and Virginia are the first bellwethers nationally, pretty ahead of the midterm. So Democratic voters who are chomping at the bit to have their first, especially now, as Brent pointed to about, Jack is going to be tied to Trump, which he wasn't in the past. Now he is. So those two things are all colliding kind of simultaneously. So it's really it's a fascinating test case, as John mentioned as well, to just see how that all shakes out over these next few months.
Thanks, Matt. Brent, what are your thoughts on the issue?
I'm sorry, I was answering on which issue? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. What do you think about the tariff issue and what's going on in terms of the economy and how that's going to impact Chitterelli's campaign?
It seemed like it was going to be a lot worse earlier in the year when your 401k was plummeting and we weren't sure how long the tariffs were going to change with China. There was talk at that time in inner circles that Chitterelli's campaign was going to be screwed, for lack of a better term. I heard Republicans saying like that, Trump better figure this out or it's going to cost Chitterelli the governorship. We don't have that as much anymore. The economy is not as much in turmoil. And I mean, who knows we have a whole summer before, a few months is a lifetime in politics. So a lot could change, but it's really a question of, it's going to be a dual referendum. Do people want 4 more years of Democrats after Phil Murphy, or do they want to try something else? Even with what some may consider the risk of Donald Trump's presidency, it's going to be a dual referendum on Murphy and Trump. The question is who wins out.
Thanks, Brent. Stacie, John, was there anything you wanted to add about tariffs and the economy and how it's going to impact Chitterelli's campaign for the general election if he wins the primary?
I think that we have had a chaotic few months of Trump and his executive orders, and right, and there was an initial crazy reaction, and it's kind of calming down now, and it'll be interesting to see what's happening like in a couple of months with the tariffs because right now we really don't know. Like one day it's 30%, one day it's 50%, I can't tell you what is going on with him right now. But in a couple of months, we'll have a better idea of what is actually going to happen and how people take that. And then we'll be able to see that that's what voters will have on their minds. So I think voters are smart. In New Jersey, the governor's race, I mean, Trump plays a part, but really I feel like the majority of people, it's taxes are an issue, right? That is what people are going to focus on in November, their pocketbooks. And that's usually what determines, who becomes governor of New Jersey.
Thanks, Stacie. John, was there anything else you wanted to add?
I just think it's another wild card, right? I mean, we've already discussed like a lot of the things, from a coverage perspective, it's great to have things not be preordained when you're covering any issue or a race. It just makes it more interesting. And this is just one more thing, right? Because the president can wake up one day and be mad at somebody or something. Uh, and because of the current way the tariff policies are playing out, you know, he may do one thing and it would have these consequences. If there is a tariff that's really bad for a New Jersey industry, all of a sudden, and we've seen this play out with different cases already. But then does the tariff stay in place or not by the time we get to the finish line? And sometimes you do reputational damage. We're already seeing fewer people booking summer vacations in New Jersey from Canada. And so you already do some reputational damage no matter how the policy itself shakes out in the end. And so it's just another one of these things where it's sort of a wild card headed toward November.
Thanks, John. Well, we've talked a lot about the Republican side of the primary. Let's switch to the Democratic side. So, again, according to polls, Congresswoman Cheryl appears to be in the lead. Brent, back to you again. Are those polls to be believed, and how close of a race is it on the Democratic side?
It's funny. I spent a good portion of yesterday talking to a bunch of Democrats and even some Republicans and being like, okay, you feet to the fire, who's going to win this primary? And a lot of it was Cheryl. Like it was like that kind of response. And it was like, I guess if we're going by the old metrics, but because the county line is gone and because so much has changed, it's really kind of anyone's game still, although Cheryl is considered the soft front runner, as I've been calling her, because she has a slight advantage in the polls, but who knows whether these polls would be trusted. Plus, you have 6 real candidates on this side. Everyone has a path to victory. They're all former elected officials who aren't household names, but are known in political circles. And, I wouldn't be, if anybody won, I wouldn't be shocked. I'd be like, okay, I could see how that happened. And you really only need a little bit more than 20% of the electorate to win what's going to be a very low turnout election. So, yeah, the Democratic side is interesting to watch. And it's going to be interesting. We might not get a winner on Tuesday.
Yeah, and who do you think is her stiffest competition in the field currently?
Right now, I'd say the momentum definitely seems to be on Steve Phillips' side. He seems to have rallied a lot of young voters and progressive voters who are still upset about the establishment in the wake of last year's Senate race. But also, there's Ras Baraka's not too far off, especially after his arrest. He's kind of galvanized many of the left-leaning voters who tend to come out big in primaries. And then I also keep hearing, don't count out Steve Sweeney because he's consolidated the South and he just needs a little bit of labor support to get over that hump. So I'm telling you, I mean, the general wisdom right now is that Mikey Sherrill has a slight edge in this race, but everyone's like kind of throwing up their hands and being like, it could be any of them.
Stacie, Fulop, I believe, is the only candidate that announced a lieutenant governor selection before the primary in Sheena Cullum, who is, I guess, the village president in South Orange. What did you think about that? And do you think that impacts the race in any way?
No. That's my simple answer. And that I don't think at this stage that the lieutenant governor impacts the race. I think um, the what impacts the race is getting out supporters. In a primary, I'm Bloomberg, so I got to give you a couple of numbers. Like there's 6 million eligible voters, and last primary like this, 12% that was voter turnout. And it was like for Democratic ballots, 400,000 people voted. That's actually more than I thought it was. So 400,000 people among six candidates. It could be, it's anyone's game. I think people are going to focus on the main candidate, and it's really all about who can get the most people out, right? And look at Sweeney when in his race for as senator, right? He didn't get enough people out. Maybe he was a little too cocky with that, and the trucker, right? Durr won. So it's primaries. You never know, and it's so many candidates. I really think it's going to be a close one.
John, in terms of the candidates on the Democratic side, where do you see their differences in terms of business and how they would handle the economy in New Jersey?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Brent touched on this a little bit. You can look at sort of which lane some of these candidates are running in. So, maybe Sweeney and Cheryl more in that middle of the road lane, Baraka and maybe Fulop tending to go a little more progressive. So at least in terms of what they would be promising, I think we could expect to see policies enacted from candidates sort of where they're lining up and whether again going back to like maybe some of these micro issues um, where that falls versus say just big picture and how they're running the overall state. Is there a big deficit with the budget? Are they making pension payments? Things like that that I think businesses would care about big picture. And again, I would emphasize, what my colleagues have said about just how close this is. I mean, we're talking about things like ballot position in counties because now that's being drawn and is wide open. Some of the polling, I mean, when I look at some of the polls, like statistically, with the margins of error, like plus or minus 5%, I mean, these are big swings when we think about the numbers that Stacie brought up. It's really hard to declare any one person as sort of a front runner just looking at it statistically. Maybe because a lot of the candidates have been focusing their attack ads, it seems like recently on Cheryl, that by default we would give her that position. But I think Brent has coined a good term in terms of saying soft front runner. Because it makes it more interesting as journalists to cover something that's not preordained. We're going to go into election night in as much suspense as everyone else, which makes it a lot more fun to cover.
Yeah, no, on that subject, Brent, this campaign obviously has been going on for a long time. It feels like it's been going on for decades. But in terms of the Democratic side, what changes, if any, have you seen in terms of the Democratic campaign since Trump was elected? Do you think that the candidates have changed any of their positions because of Trump? Have they made any kind of statements or done anything that you think stood out because Trump was elected president in their reaction to that?
I think the only two things I can point to where they really changed, aside from the fact that every Democrat is vowing to be the strongest fighter against Trump, that they're all saying, I'm going to be the one to stand up to Trump. So that's been a major theme in the Democratic primary. But immigration is kind of a tricky subject for Democrats because polling shows that a broad majority of the country supports some sort of immigration reform. So you see the left, really left-leaning people like Spiller and Fulop and Baraka say that we really have to strengthen our sanctuary policies to help undocumented immigrants. But you see Sweeney saying he would repeal some sanctuary state policies. Cheryl saying that she's not in favor of the law to write them into law, the bill to write them in the law, because it would fall apart in court. So you see that's something that they've kind of not wavered on, but been a little soft on. And then they're all focused on affordability. That's something we saw in 2021 when Murphy came close to losing last time. Democrats became the party of affordability. They said we're going to put in tax relief programs and work on costs. So you hear Trump fighting and lowering costs. Those are two big themes of the Democratic primary.
In terms of the election overall, I think between the Democrats and the Republicans, I think there's 11 total candidates. So this question is for you, Stacie. Do you think that's a good thing? And do you think it causes voter confusion? And at the end of the day, is it positive or negative for the voters in New Jersey to have so many candidates to choose from?
I think it's a good thing. I think that too often too few people get in the race. That just as soon as the one with the most money and the biggest mouth gets out there, the others just fall away. And this is an example that people understand that they have just as much a chance as the other person or the other six whatever people that are in the race. So I think it's interesting. I've been writing a lot about ranked choice voting in New York. I don't want to get into it too quick, but that's where you have a lot of people in a race and you rank them. That's something some states are moving towards. It's an interesting thing because we're trying to encourage more people to speak up, and they want their voice heard. And so it's interesting to see so many candidates. I think it does pull away. Like this race would have been easier if it was only for a candidate, if it was only two or three candidates. But this many, it really is anyone's game next week.
Thanks, Stacie. And Brent, how has it been to cover the primary, given that there's 11 candidates?
Oh, that's another story. I mean, yeah, I absolutely believe that with the loss of the county line, and it's a more democratic process to have 11 candidates. Although we've had many candidates in the past. What makes this different is, as I said before, the number of real candidates, meaning candidates who have an actual path to victory. You have 6 on the Democratic side and really 3 on the Republican side. So all of them, you could see a world where any of them are called, Governor Sweeney or Governor Bramnick. So it's been a lot, and these are all people that I've covered for many years and known. So you get a lot of people sending you, oh, can you cover this? Can you cover that? So it's been very overwhelming. And I can imagine if I'm a voter, feeling a bit overwhelmed and confused. That's if if the primary is going on at all. We show that polls show that many people aren't paying attention. They might not really pay attention to the fall. But yeah, it's been a lot to cover. I need a nap.
If I could just jump back in one point.
Yeah, please.
I think someone we haven't talked a lot about that I'm really curious about in the Democratic primary is Sean Spiller. He's with the teachers union. I'm curious. They have a track record of getting people out to vote, and I I'm looking. I really want. I'll be looking at those numbers next week. I'm curious. He's polling low, but it's all about like I keep saying, who comes out to vote, and unions are powerful. So I'll be looking for that.
Yeah, and to Stacey's point, I think by last account, the PAC, the NJA PAC, has spent about $40 million on the election. John, did you see any impact so far of that $40 million spend?
In people's mailboxes and ads for sure. I'm sure there's a lot of it's making its way into the economy as well. But Stacie raises a really good point. You're going to have the teachers union fully behind one candidate, not just because the unions endorse that candidate, because that's a homegrown candidate. And so that's another one of these wild cards. If the teachers union, which we know is an influential force in New Jersey politics, if it mobilizes voters, that can make a difference in places. And you have to put it a little bit in the context of Steve Sweeney's history with the teachers union and some animosity there. Um, and that's an interesting dynamic. But yeah, I mean, Spiller, um, I don't think can be dismissed. Again, I'm not a big candidate horse race polling person. But I don't think even if we were seeing different poll numbers, that Spiller could be minimized in terms of still having a shot at this.
And last question on the gubernatorial race before we move on, and it goes to Brent. What should we be looking for on the Republican side and the Democratic side on election night? What are the indicators you'll be looking at to see like who's going to win this thing?
I mean, I imagine, again, unless there's a groundswell of support for Spadia that we're not hearing about, I imagine Chitterelli's race will be called relatively early. And on the Democratic side, I'm going to be looking for, I don't know, like it could be anybody. We can, if Sweeney does really well in the South, maybe we could see whether he makes a run at it. But if Sherrill consolidates a lot of support in the North, it may be too late for anyone else. So as John said, this is an unusual election night for us. Whereas we're expecting some surprises, we're not going to be hit with like a truck driver beating the state Senate president. We expect there may be some sort of upheaval this time, maybe.
Well, it's certainly going to be interesting. So let's move on to the budget because that's another huge thing going on in New Jersey right now. As we know, the legislature has until June 30th to approve a state budget. And Murphy's proposed budget is, I think, $58.1 billion. So this question, I guess, goes to John. Where are the legislative leaders like Speaker Coughlin and Senate President Scuteri? What do they think of the proposed budget, and where are we at in the process?
Yeah, good question. We'll find out soon enough. Maybe not as soon as some of us would like. Hopefully not, just before midnight on June 30th. We're at that point in the process where, so the governor has come out with say what I would call like the final draft of the executive's budget, and we got that a few weeks ago when the all the April tax payments were counted up, and the budget is now the governor's version is now 58.3 billion for those keeping close score at home. The forecast got a little bit better coming out of April, both for what we're going to collect by June 30th and then what they foresee the state will collect in terms of revenues headed past July 1. And so that's allowed a little more spending for those who may like it or not like it. And of course, this is all before legislative leaders add their priorities. Often we see pet projects added as well at this time of the year. And so we're in that like blackout phase where maybe everyone's huddled up or maybe they're not doing it quite yet. This year, there are some tax hikes the governor's proposed, about $1 billion in tax hikes. And I think, and I know that the chamber members know from hearing recently from Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin, I don't think we can expect all of these tax hikes to be to make it to the finish line, especially in an election year for the full assembly. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of them get through. The challenge is the state for several years has been spending more on the expenditure side than it's been generating on the revenue side through taxes. And so you can get away with that for a certain number of years because there's been a robust surplus that they've been spending down. But at some point, that surplus starts to run out or at least get to a level where the credit rating agencies are going to say, you can't cut anymore or we will cut your credit rating. And that still has some political consequences in New Jersey when we get an upgrade or when we get dinged. So that's sort of the challenge before legislative leaders right now. I think they do have some more money to spend, whether that means restoring some cuts Murphy's proposed or spending sort of in the way of not accepting some of his tax hikes. The challenge is how far do they go? How many tax hikes get rejected? How much new spending do we see in the appropriations bill? and what's the remaining surplus, and can the credit rating agencies live with that? So that's sort of where we are. And now we wait, me just like everyone else, for the introduction of a spending bill and then any tax legislation that has to be passed alongside it.
Yeah, no, complicating all of this is the proposed federal funding cuts, which could impact New Jersey to a tune of about $5 billion. Matt, what are your thoughts on that and how that can impact, the future of New Jersey's economy?
Yeah, and that's kind of looming over all of this. The governor mentioned it in his budget address, right? He said that we may get to a break the glass moment during the briefings leading into the budget. That's what all his officials were talking about. I actually just asked him about this very question 2 weeks ago after the Netflix groundbreaking. He said we're still watching. Again, the House is obviously federally has passed their bill. The Senate is taking it up now. So what that ultimately looks like and how extreme the cuts are remain to be seen. But that, I mean, I've even heard, that if it's a really, really extreme cut, like it could even mean bringing a special session later in the summer if it comes to it, to potentially have to come up with a solution, like a stopgap, again, break the glass moment. So that, I mean, John succinctly laid out, kind of the state of play statewide, and Tom Bracken wrote a great op-ed this morning too. But the federal cuts is looming over this entire process, and then you also, have the gubernatorial race in the backdrop, right? I mean, if you take it, then move into the local issues, you have the school funding stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot of things at play, but the Medicaid stuff is really kind of looming over the entire process and can kind of upend a lot of things, even the best laid plans for the state budget if it takes a certain turn.
On that subject, John, if the worst case scenario happens and New Jersey loses, about $5 billion in federal funding, what do you think's on the block in New Jersey in terms of the state budget?
Typically what we see, and I think Matt laid it out really well, and it's another one of these wild cards. We were just talking about the primary, right? Can you imagine Chitterelli having to defend if there's mass upheaval with the state budget? And the scale is accurate. Typically, what we see is the surplus gets spent down because it's the path of least pain. Quite frankly, it's easy to spend down your surplus. In the past, we've seen things like the funding for property tax relief programs be pulled back. That just happened during the downturn that we saw at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. So when we talk about the scale of the surplus, it's probably this year not just an academic discussion and what will rating agencies say. It would also be something that you would, a surplus is on the sidelines for unforeseen drops in revenue brought on by economic downturns or recessions, but also for unforeseen expenditure needs. And in this case, the state could be forced to say, do we want to pick up the slack for massive federal cuts? And there are things happening outside of even maybe say the four corners of the federal budget discussions. Even deportations have an effect on New Jersey's economy and output, specifically with some industries we've heard of big impacts. And that goes to, our revenues, quite frankly. So looking ahead as the new fiscal year begins in July, there are forecasts that assume a certain amount of federal funding coming into New Jersey, which we have to put an asterisk next to. But also there are forecasts for state revenues that I think foresee sort of a status quo in terms of what our economy looks like and how it is performing. Some of these things that are happening at the federal level will have an impact on the program side, how much we get for programs like Medicaid, but could have also an impact on the revenue side, meaning are we going to be in a recession environment? Are people going to be hit with tariffs that cause them to pull back their consumer spending? So just as we have a lot of wild cards when we talk about politics, I think when it comes to the budget, no matter what the state does, and this just happened in Illinois where the budget is balanced based on what the state does, but it's balanced sort of in pencil because of how much that their budget relies on federal funding. And I think it's going to be the same in New Jersey. I'm sorry for the long-winded way of saying what happens by July 1 is just sort of what the state can control. And we might go into the summer months without a lot of certainty in terms of the things that the state can't control that will have a big impact.
Thanks, John. And on the subject of what we can control, since 2016, state spending is up about 70%, roughly from 34 billion to 58 billion in terms of budget. So, Stacie, do you think spending is out of control in the state of New Jersey? And how do you think? Depending on who wins the governorship in November, where does state spending go?
Well, I mean, I've been covering New Jersey a long time, and we're spending a hell of a lot more than we used to. I I don't have an opinion on it. I mean, as a taxpayer, I mean, some of the programs and things that we've put more spending in have is what makes New Jersey great, right? Like our education and programs for the needy. Um, but on the other hand, my taxes are really high, right? And I want them to go down, as we always do. I think the spending, it makes Democrats vulnerable this year. I don't think people like to see the spending keep going up. They want their taxes lower. I just, and some of the priorities, I think people will question. I think Governor Murphy's legacy and something he's obviously focused on is the pension payment, and it's a huge amount, billions and billions that he has dedicated to the pension system. More, I mean, that's what I guarantee that is what he will be remembered by. But it's been to the detriment of other programs. So, I mean, I can't remember. I know John Reitmeyer knows this like off the top of his head, the percent of the budget that goes to the pension, but it's a large chunk that I think some question whether that could have been spent differently to help people with the pocketbook issues.
Yeah, thanks, Stacey. And on the subject of that, of the pension funding, et cetera, I mean, John, right now, I think it's on the verge of being fully funded. Is that surprising to you? And also, do you think that the property tax relief programs can they survive given the economy and all these other issues we've been talking about?
Yeah, good questions. North of 10% of state spending, Stacie.
Thank you.
Depending on how we score the dedicated revenue that comes monthly from the state lottery, but we can quibble about that afterward. So what's interesting is that this governor and current legislature for the last several fiscal years has been fully funding what the actuaries would assess to be New Jersey's annual employer pension obligations. The reason it's so expensive, more than 7 billion when you count the lottery contributions, is because for more than 2 decades, governors did not budget those full payments. And so when we look at where total spending has gone up over the last decade, we were spending a decade ago not quite 2 billion, and now we're spending over 7 billion when you count the lottery, which I do, the lottery contributions. And so that times the last several fiscal years means a lot of money is now going into the pension fund after not and in some years there were no pension payments. The state, going back to your question about recession readiness or readiness for huge expenditure needs that we could see because of the federal government, the winds shifting in Washington, the de facto surplus for many years was the pension payment. So the state maybe ran with a little less of a actual surplus because the pension payments were made at the end of the fiscal year. Chris Christie passed a law that changed that, and now we get quarterly payments. So when the payments are this big, there are big cash infusions going into the pension fund on a quarterly basis, and that's supposed to create more investment income. Then all at the end of the year, when it also made those pension contributions prone to being rated. I still think, and this shows, I think we've all covered New Jersey for quite a while now. I covered all those years when the state literally wasn't paying its bills. And when it came to pension obligations and seeing what that did to the credit rating. So I still think it's a huge story when a governor and legislature budget the full pension contribution, not only because it's a huge allocation and it is the area of growth in the budget when we talk about growth in the budget, but for so many years, and we still have this huge unfunded liability in New Jersey, whether we like it or not, tied to the pension system. And so I like I this budget includes another full contribution. I still think it's an open question going into the next whoever the next governor is, and we talked about it, whether they think it's good policy to continue to do this just because of how much, and it was alluded to that the things that you could do with 7 billion if that's not your priority as governor. It's been for the current governor. Oh, in his second term, we have to remember Murphy also was not making full contributions when he became governor, which, he has a little bit of responsibility for that, but it's really the governors and legislatures before him. And we'll see going forward. It's budgeted for fiscal year 2026. We'll see what the next governor has to say.
Thanks, John. And I wanted to see, Scott, do we have any questions from the audience? Maybe we can get a question in before we start to wrap up here.
Nope, I think it's time to wrap up, Michael.
All right, sounds good. And we had a lot of other things we wanted to try to get to, but obviously in New Jersey right now, it's all about the governor's race and about the budget. And so, I wanted to, I guess, move on to as Tom Bracken mentioned at the top of the panel today. This is our first reporters forum since we lost Matt Arco. He was a really respected New Jersey reporter. He covered a governor's, presidential campaigns for New Jersey Advanced Media for more than 10 years. And he's really sorely missed by readers and everyone in the profession. And so before we say goodbye today, I wanted to see any thoughts from the panel regarding that they would like to share. And I'd like to start with Brent, who I know worked with him very closely.
Yeah, Matt was one of my very best friends and my closest colleague. We worked on stories together for 12 years, covering the Christie administration, the Murphy administration, presidential campaigns. We went all over the map, covering Trump and Christie in the 2016 presidential election. And I'm kind of known as the good cop around here. I get along with everybody and ask fair questions, but and Matt was the bad cop in the sense that Matt held everybody's feet to the fire in a great way and asked tough questions and just didn't take BS lightly. And he was a great journalist, a great advocate for the people of New Jersey. And I miss him every day because I literally called him every day of my life for a decade. And both me, the newspaper, our company, and the state are a lesser place because he's gone.
Yeah, thank you, Brent. Is there anybody else on the panel that would like to share their thoughts?
I could just like to say I had such respect for Matt. I was at many press conferences with him. I admired how he covered Christie on the road. I just you're right that New Jersey is lesser because Matt is not there covering it. Um, he was just such watching him, especially covering Chris Christie, who is not the biggest fan of reporters, and he always just would see Matt with a smile, and he had an imperative. He believed in journalism and he was going to cover it. You don't like it? Sorry. But he was going to cover it because he knew how important journalism was, especially in New Jersey, where we've lost a lot of reporters. I mean, not all, some have died, but others, we're just, our industry is shrinking. And he was a definite asset and will definitely be missed.
Yeah, his work was just always like he's just to everybody's point, just a pure journalist. Like just loved reading his work. I mean, just respected work, and he was always super cool. Anytime see him out at a press conference or anything like that. But Brent, you wrote a great tribute after he passed. Again, sorry for your loss. I know for your organization itself. I mean, that's he. and just for the state of New Jersey, I mean, it is a lesser place without his work, because he was, top of the heap in terms of journalists covering the state for sure.
Thanks, Matt. John, anything else you
Yeah,
want to
I
say?
think what I would add, Brent worked closely with Matt as a colleague. And yeah, I mean, condolences to you, Brent. I worked alongside Matt. I don't know if you say competitor, but you know, just as stellar of a journalist, just a super nice guy. And I don't know what that counts for in our world anymore, but as someone who worked alongside Matt and saw how hard he worked, sometimes in our business that people can get carried away with we're a competitor, or you have this story, or that was never what Matt was about. We would be on Reporters Roundtable together. He's just a super nice guy, and that might not have, as a journalist, you might not see that in a byline, but as someone who interacted, it's sad for the state from a journalism perspective, but also just, we need more good people, and Matt was definitely one of them.
Thanks so much, John. So with that, I wanted to thank our panelists, Stacie, Matt, Brent, John. Awesome, awesome panel today. We really digged into these issues and I really appreciate it. And with that, I want to throw it back to Tom Bracken to close the program today.
Michael, thank you very much for your job today. Great job. And to Matt and Stacie and John and Brent, great commentary on so many significant uncertainties that are out there today, unprecedented uncertainties, and the ramifications and the results of these uncertainties will have a great impact on the future of our state. So great job from all of you. I have to tell everybody I'm on a different computer than I started because someone infiltrated our event today. I got knocked out, and there were messages in the chat box purportedly from members of the panel. Those chat box comments were not made by any of our reporters, and I apologize to the panelists for those infiltrations, but we corrected it, and we're back on, and hopefully just another sad commentary on what's going on today. First time in the history of our chamber that anybody's infiltrated one of our events and tried to deep six it. So we came back and we finished the event, and it was well done. And thank you to all of you. And thank you again to our sponsors, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield and KPMG. We hope to see you all at our open house a week from Thursday. It'll be a great event, a lot of people, and hopefully we'll have by that time the two nominees for the governorship there. And we look forward to seeing you at the State House, or I'm sorry, at the State Museum a week from Thursday at 4:00. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to Michael for moderating, and we hope you have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.